Hello friends, today we are going to talk about the trade barriers that might be there when you are trying to export your product to the country you have already identified. When you are exporting, you might be exporting two types of products. It might be a merchandise product, say a garments. It might be a service which can be audit and account service, can be an IT enabled service. On the first form of products, that is merchandise, there can be two types of barriers. The first can be tariff barrier, that is when you are exporting, say the price of your product is 100 rupees per unit. Now the importing country impose a 5% tariff on your product. So the landed price of the product in the importing country will be 105 rupees. Now that is one form of barrier, and one might check if in a number of dynamic countries are there for you, then in which dynamic market tariff barrier is lower. That means you can enter that market in a more competitive manner. There can be another form of barrier that might be there, which would be non-tariff barrier. So essentially product standards might be imposed on your product. Say the importing country telling you what type of dyes you can use for bleaching of the garment. The third important factor for you would be what type of government supports can be there for conducting export business. And finally, coming back to the second form of products that we talked, that is services, there can be very many type of barriers which will be mostly regulation based, not like tariff. So the regulations can be in terms of upward limit on movement of professionals like H-1B visa in US, and there can be certain other form of regulation like FDI inflow in the importing country. So we are going to look at the trade barriers on merchandise and service sector in an intended export market. So let's start with the discussion on understanding the trade databases and market identification. To begin with, we will talk about the harmonized system of trade data related classification. Now, why do we require a trade data classification? When you export a product, essentially you are exporting, suppose 100% cotton shirt, bag, a vehicle, but the vehicle can be, let's say, 800cc engine vehicle, 1000cc engine vehicle, or 1500cc engine vehicle. Similarly, shirts, as we said, it can be a 100% cotton shirt or of a different polyester. So the exporter, the product you are sending, and the importer, the product he or she is demanding, there has to be a match. For that match to occur, we require the harmonized system. The harmonized system, or HS system as we are going to call it, is based on a classification which goes by even number, that is at 2-digit, 4-digit, 6-digit, 8-digit or 10-digit. As you can see here, at HS 2-digit, 4-digit and 6-digit, the classifications are called chapter, heading or subheading respectively, and below each 6-digit, the 8 or 10-digit codes are called the tariff line or the actual traded products. Now, one thing you must have noted that the chapters and headings are not changing over the period. The HS classification is changing almost every 5 years. It's the subheadings at 6-digit level which change. Why? Because some of the new products are coming into international business. Some old products, they are going out of business. A good example would be that the dot matrix printer during 90s, it was being traded. Now nobody trade into that. iPhone, it was not being traded in the earlier period, but today it's one of the major traded item. So we require code for one, whereas the earlier traded product will go out of business. So how are we going to put the products for international business? We can look at one practical example. Suppose we are looking at one vegetable product, which can be the watermelons. Now, they will come under section 2, vegetable products. Under the section, we will find a number of HS chapters would appear. So we might get, let's say, chapter 08, or which will include all edible fruits and nuts there. Under the HS 2-digit, all the type of fruits will be arranged. So under 0807, we are going to find the melons coming. Fresh watermelons would come under 080711. And finally, at HS 8-digit, find the products that India is exporting would be classified. In US, however, we are going to find there will be a number of HS 10-digit products. Here, the idea is we see the products are being classified under seedless or with seed, and even within each of the categories, we look at the date at which the watermelons enter the US market. Is it April 1 to November 30 or December 1 to March 31st? So, accordingly, the code will be different. So, one thing we'll remember, the HS code of the products are harmonized up to the first 6-digit, but below that, it might differ. So how can we use actually the harmonized system to identify the product of your interest? One example might come in terms of leather bags. You first are trying to look at the leather bag that you are exporting in terms of leather goods. So we'll find the leather goods would come under HS 42, which includes all the form of leather products. Then you come to the travel goods or handbags, which will come under 4202. Among all the HS 4-digit codes within HS 42, that is leather. After that, we are going to find handbag of leather in 420221, and within that, finally the tariff line would come. If you are trying to export money bag or wallet, it would come under a different HS 6-digit category. So this is just the reason way how you can essentially present your product. So just looking at the wallet example, here the HS code is becoming different as compared to the earlier product that we are observing. Now, very quickly, we are going to look at how are you going to find your product among all the HS codes that might be there. It is easy actually. There are a couple of rules of thumb that you can follow for this purpose. What you are going to look is that number 1, stage of processing. So the rule of thumb is the less processed product would appear near 1 and the more processed products would appear near the end of the spectrum. So that's the rule for HS section. If you are looking your product, in which section it should be categorized. In case you are looking at your products within chapter or heading. Well, there would be 3 rule of thumbs that you can follow. 1, as I said, it is the material content that we might check. The material content is coming from, say, a product is made of rubber, then coming under chapter 40. It is made of wood, then it is coming under chapter 44. Likewise, there is another way in which we can identify a product in the HS spectrum, that is the usage or function. Suppose you are exporting footwears. Now, There could be leather footwears, but they are not going to appear under HS42, like the case of, let's say, the wallet or handbag that we have seen earlier. Footwears are going to come under HS64, or motor vehicles are going to come under HS87. There is a third rule of thumb that you might follow. The rule of thumb would be you look at the stage of processing. You might find the paper pulp coming under HS47, paper rim coming under HS48, the books and magazines coming under HS49, but this actually follows the stage of processing rule of thumb. That is, the less processed product would appear first and the final processed product would appear at the end. In a similar manner, we would find the cotton, yarn, fiber, fabric and garment, the same order we followed. So, anytime you are suppose currently producing a product and little unsure about the exact HS code of that, you may try to identify the code by applying these principles in your mind. Now, suppose you are little unsure about which product might be important for your exact product. For that, you have to apply your logic. Which one is more important? It is the material content or the usage or function by which a particular code would be applied for a product. I will take one example here. Suppose you are producing automobile part and component products. In case we talk about the tubes. The tubes, well, though they can be used for motor cars, they might be used for certain other purposes as well. So what we might say here, they will not come under HS87 or automobile products. They will appear under HS40 or the rubber products instead. Conversely, if you try to look into the safety airbags, they appear under HS87 because they are focused automobile products. Spark ignition, on the other hand, if you think of, well, they are going to be used in engines, so they might be used in certain other product as well, apart from that of automobile. So they will come under HS85, that is for engines only. Now, let's come to the issues that we might be facing with the harmonized system framework. The harmonized system, now we know that it will match the product code that you are exporting from India to the importing country only up to 6 digits. But can the HS code have certain form of concerns when you use or certain caution that you need to adopt? The answer is yes, there are. I'll just look at one practical example in this particular slide. If you look at, we look at one particular data series, which is India's export of T-shirts which come under HS 610990 to US, and we look at import of the same product over a period of time. Now, here we are looking at the products at HS 8 digit level or more, that is within the HS 6 digit level, and compare the two series. Here I am not using all the codes within the product classification because the table will not permit that. But one thing is very clear from the analysis, that the value of Indian export to US is way above the value of US import from India. What does it mean? Let's look at it from the practical exporter side. If you are trying to export a product to America, then by looking at the particular value of Indian export, the American market looks quite good for Indian perspective. But if you look at the American imports from India, the value is much lesser. So question is, you trust Indian export data more or US import data more? That's one of the concern you have to keep in mind, and one of the way in which you can look at the import data often should be believed more just for the simple reason many a times, suppose from India export goes to America or Hong Kong or Singapore, the importing corporate might actually process the product there and export it to a third country after certain value addition. In that case, the final product would end up in the final or third country market. So, many a times, actual demand is not intended for the country where certain processing is only being done. So, we will keep that perspective while using any international database. Now, what are the various databases that can be accessed for understanding the international market? There are very many databases. We might get some of the databases which are maintained by multilateral bodies, that is, international players. So, some of them can be TradeMap, WITS, UN Comtrade database, all of which actually give very detailed idea about international business. So, ITC TradeMap, WITS maintained by World Bank, UN Comtrade database maintained by UNCTAD, all of them are very good databases for practical use. Let's go to TradeMap database for market identification, which is a very good resource. You can actually use very many other databases, but TradeMap gives a good idea. Let me come into the TradeMap database output. If you are not having any membership of TradeMap, then you can just open it, go for login, and you can actually create your own user ID and password, which you can use from your office, home, anywhere. And it's a free database maintained by UN. So here the database can be used in the following fashion. There is a product window from which you can select your product at HS4, 6 digit level. You can select an exporter which can be India for your product. You can select any trade partner of India from the drop-down menu. You can select export or import, but I think we should be going for the exports because we are interested in that only. So let's go for the login once. If you click on login, then in case you don't have any user ID created at TradeMap, you can go for create an account and register now. As I have ID already created, I just enter my user ID and password, and TradeMap would allow me to log in and use it. So we have India export. Now let me take one particular commodity and do the market identification analysis. We can get the data by product, by country, and by service. You can go at HS 2, 4, 6 digit level classification. You can also go for tariff line. You can go for the value. You can go for share in percentage. You can go for US dollar or any other currency. Anything that you are interested in drawing the data, you can use these tools accordingly. Let's do the market identification for one. So in this example, India we have selected. Suppose we take one particular garment product as an example. We click on HS61 where apparel and garments are there. 6109 is one of the major traded product. We can click on 6109 and we see 610910 is one of the important exports from India. So we click on this particular product. The rule of thumb, please remember, if we click on the plus, it gives you up to the next HS classification level. That is, if you click on the plus sign beside a HS 4-digit code, just like the example we followed, we get, after clicking on 6109, we get 610910 and 610990. Now, if we click on 610910, instead of the plus sign, we get all the countries who import a product exported by India. This is a yearly time series output that we are getting. Now, what we want to know, which market India should be exporting. For that, we come to trade indicators. If we select trade indicator from the drop-down menu of the data type, then we get a number of entries. First, it shows the raw data and a couple of share and growth rates we observe. Now, we look at 4 output in particular. The first output we are going to look at the share of a country in India's export. If the share is relatively high, in that case, Indian exports can reach the market with relative ease. We should take care of that. If we look at share of the partner countries in world import, that means the country is actually having a relatively high demand in the category. If we look at this column, the total import growth of the country over the 5-year period, we look at the world import growth in the first row, which give us an average, and individual country import growth row we can check. From there we can identify whether import is high or low, and we look at the tariff barrier in the markets. Suppose you can't identify whether a market is a relatively good market or not from this dimension. What you can do, you can click on graph beside the table written here. Clicking on that, what we get, we see a graphical output. In the graph, we observe that there are a couple of country bubbles, some yellow, some blue. The yellow bubbles show that Indian export growth to these countries is, let's say, 5% as compared to the import growth from these countries from the world of 7%. That means our reach in these markets is below these countries' ability to grow. So here the idea is India might be able to export to these countries in long run, but only after understanding which markets, what barriers constrain India's import in these markets. Blue countries, on the other hand, they show our export to these countries is, let's say, 9% compared to their import growth from the world of 2%. That we are already winning in these markets. So we can actually export these markets with relative ease. In case we are still little unsure about the possibility of entering the market, we click on the bubble graph, the next type of bubble, and from there we try to check which market can be a relatively better market for our growth. We see that here a number of countries are appearing which are showing whether a country can be a dynamic or declining market. So here the countries with relatively high import growth rate can be considered an ideal target for our growth. Finally, how can we look at competitiveness of export of a particular product from India? That we can do by looking at this particular graphical tool, going one step up, that is instead of 610910 to 6109, and select by. So here, like after going at 6109, we can see there is a red line which is showing the world growth rate in the category. So we can define a market as dynamic or declining market from that. So Spain is a dynamic market, a blue market which can be targeted in short run. Germany is a declining market and yellow market, so it might be looked at in long run period. So a dynamic market blue can be targeted short run. A dynamic market yellow can be targeted in long run. Now instead of product, instead of country, if we go for product selection, we are going to find just a output by which products are shown in 4 different boxes. There is a red vertical line starting from 0, which shows that on the right hand side of that, products where India's share in world market is increasing. That means India is increasing competitiveness. On the left side of the vertical line are those products where India's competitiveness is going down or our export share is declining. The horizontal red line above that, the markets, the products can be called growing sector. Below that, the products can be called declining sector. If a product is falling under winner in growing sector, that means the share of India in export of the product is on the rise, and we also see import of the product in the world is increasing. So we are going to say that India export, if it falls in this particular quadrant, as we see for this particular product 610990, then India is a competitive exporter in this product. Finally, we look at, suppose the example of Germany here as a country. We click on Germany. We look at the trade flow imports and we click on companies. Then we see there are a number of companies which are importing various form of garments from the world. We can click on any one of the categories given, and from there we can get the details, contact information of the firms which are in Germany and involved in import of garments. From there, you can try to pick up by getting in touch with them, getting their email or phone number from the website, how to conduct business with them. So in this lecture, we checked when you have identified a market and trying to export there, what form of trade barriers might be imposed on your product and how can you compare the barrier across countries, and in an importing country, what might be the form of tariff margin dispreference India might be suffering from. We also checked, in case you are trying to export a particular services in a market, then what form of trade barriers are being imposed on your service in the importing country, and if you try to compare more than one country, which country might be more stringent in terms of trade barriers. So accordingly you can strategize which country to fast track for export and which country might be taken up in long run. This should be a very important lesson for conducting export business.